Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today is Tuesday, the 25th of Adar, March 9th, 2021. And we continued our discussion in the weekly Torah reading. And this week is a double Torah reading. It's the last two Torah readings of the book of Exodus. And we discuss and continue the discussion of the building of the tabernacle and the garments that were discussed in already the previous Torah readings of Teruma and Tetzaveh. But in this week's Torah reading, it's where Moshe continues to give this to the Jewish people. You know, when we look at people's clothing, before you go for an interview, before you go to shul, before you go out to a wedding, before you go to any occasion, and before you leave your house, you always check in the mirror to see, what am I wearing? Why am I wearing? Do I look good? Then I ask my spouse, my friends, my relatives, should I be wearing this? Is this the correct thing? Why is so much emphasis put on the clothing, what you should wear, and you think that your clothing is going to make that impression? Why should it matter what you wear? Why does the clothing really make a difference that when we go to a place, are we so concerned about what we're wearing? What is it about clothing that we put such great emphasis and are concerned about what we're wearing? You know, in general, what's the relationship with clothing? We know that the Talmud tells us that a great scholar should dress appropriately because people would look at his clothing and say, look how this person is dressed. We also know that clothing makes a first impression on a person when you meet. But why is it the clothing? What's so important about the clothing? What's so significant about the clothing? To the extent that in this week's Torah reading, the Torah takes 31 verses to discuss the garments that the priest and the high priest wore. A few weeks ago, the Torah took 43 verses to explain and decipher and go into great detail what were the garments of the Kohen Gadol. Why was it so important for the Torah to tell us and stress about this great importance of what the priests did or did not wear and how to make their clothing so exact and so perfect to the extent of the detail that the Torah goes into in elaborating the purpose of the clothing? The Torah tells us, the Talmud relates two stories about the garments of the Kohen Gadol. One story, the Talmud relates that there was once this convert that was listening, a non-Jew who was listening to a teacher teach his class about the garments of the Kohen Gadol. And as he goes by, he sees that the teacher is telling everybody the garments of what it may be and who the Kohen Gadol was and what kind of garments there were. And he was so impressed and enamored that he decided he wanted to convert. So he went to Shammai, who was the leader of the rabbinical court at the time, and said, I want to convert because I want to be a Kohen Gadol. I want to wear those beautiful clothing. Shammai, upon hearing this, knows that a convert cannot be a Kohen. And this person wants to convert just to be a Kohen Gadol. He went and he chased him out of his study hall. He said, what kind of nonsense does a person want to convert to be a Kohen Gadol? It's not going to happen. So he went to the great other sage of the time, who was Hillel, and he says, I want to convert because I want to be a Kohen Gadol. So Hillel sits him down and says, listen here, my friend. Let me first explain to you that a convert cannot be a Kohen. And if you become converted to Judaism, you're going to be an Israelite. And not only are you an Israelite, but once you convert to Judaism, you become an Israelite. Should you walk into the holy temple where you're not allowed to be, you're liable to the death penalty. You sure you want to embrace such a religion? If your whole reason is only because you want to be a high priest, A, you're not going to be a high priest. B, even if you attempt to wear the clothing or attempt to be like a high priest, you're liable of capital punishment. But because he was so enamored and so excited about Judaism, he continued to study and he eventually converted. That's one story the Talmud mentions. A second story the Talmud mentions about the Kohen Gadol and its garments was Alexander the Great was once on his way to destroy the Holy Temple. This is during the Second Temple era, when the Kutim, were those people who served idolatry in the mountains, decided to make a libelous account against the Jewish people and said that the Jewish people are plotting and prodding against Alexander the Great. Alexander then took his army and was about to go up to Jerusalem to destroy the Holy Temple. At that time, Shimon HaTzadik, who was also the Kohen Gadol, went out dressed in the high priest's garb, together with many of the Kohanim, to greet Alexander the Great. When Alexander saw Shimon wearing this whole beautiful garb of the Kohen Gadol, he jumped off his horse, fell to the floor, bowed to his knees, and asked for repentance for whatever he ever thought of. And Alexander turned out to be one of the greatest allies of the Jewish people during the Second Temple. He said, "This image is what guides me in war and makes me successful." So again, we see the garment of the Kohen Gadol, the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, is what changed a dramatic event. But why is it? Why is it the clothing that makes such a difference? To the extent that Jewish law tells us that a Kohen who goes into the Holy Temple and serves without the clothing of the Kohen Gadol is liable of capital punishment. It's as if he didn't do the service. If you're not wearing the clothing, it's nothing worth. And the question is why? Isn't a Kohen more than just the clothing he wears? Even more so, we find an interesting tidbit here. That one of the reasons why Aaron and his sons merited to be the Kohanim, the ones to lead the Jewish people, was because when Moses refused to go down to Egypt because he claimed he had a speech impediment and not to be the leader of the Jews, God said, "You know what? You don't want to go? Aaron will go. Aaron is coming out to meet you and to greet you." But the Torah adds 2 words. And he is happy about it. You know, sometimes you tell somebody to do something and they begrudgingly go ahead and do it. Over here, Aaron was being happy, willfully joining Moses. And because of that, he merited that his children will be the ones to serve in the Holy Temple, but even more so. Every single time a Kohen blesses the Jewish people, they do it out of love. Our sages tell us that every single child of Aaron, every single Kohen, all the way back to Aaron, has within himself that DNA, this unbelievable love and feelings for another Jew, being happy about somebody else. So what does it matter what clothing he's wearing? Doesn't it matter what's in your heart? Shouldn't it matter what you've done and what you're doing more than what you're wearing? Why are we being so judgmental about externalities and caring about a person, external, what they're wearing? Shouldn't their inner heart's desires to connect and cleave to God be the most important? Well, we see that clothing is not just something which is used to be able for a holy expression. Clothing, in fact, in Hebrew, as we know, every word in Hebrew has different meanings in different vernaculars. Beged means in Hebrew. Boged, same exact letters, means to rebel, treason. We see that this same garment can express what a person is feeling and say who the person is, but at the same time can also conceal. In the book of Genesis, 3 people were given garments, or used garments to conceal the truth about what was going on. Whether it was Jacob to get the blessings from his father Isaac, or Jacob's sons to conceal that their brother Joseph was killed, or Adam and Eve wearing garments after they sinned with the tree of knowledge. But notice, who made the garments for Adam and Eve? It was God. God realized that a person, a human being, needs garments. Why do we need garments? Why the externalities? Why not show our inner essence, our true Be'eh self? Why cover ourselves? To the extent that in Jewish law tells us that a person should always be covered and walk around modest and not to walk and show your nakedness. Why? Shouldn't you be a true expression of God's divine creation? Why did God give clothing to Adam and Eve? Everything else in the world God made us figure out on our own, whether it was an axe or a shovel or a sickle. But when it came to clothing, God gave it to Adam and Eve. Why? And over here we come to the bottom line and the basic point of why God asks the Jewish people to even build a tabernacle. If God is all over, why do we need a tabernacle? And our sages explain as the tabernacle is an expression of a physical existence of God in this world. Our tabernacle is an expression of to show and to visualize what God is all about. The very fact that the high priest or the priests wore the garments was like a uniform. Why does a person wear a uniform? To put them in perspective, to give them appreciation, and to allow them to understand why and what they're doing. The Kohen Gadol wore the garments to give him the importance and to show the uniqueness and quality of holiness that he was doing in the Holy Temple. And therefore, nobody else was allowed to wear that. The Kohen as well, when doing the service, needed that certain fear and awe of heaven, which therefore he had to wear those special garments while serving in the Holy Temple. The garments are a uniform, but even more so. Hasidic interpretation brought in the Tanya explains that our soul has 3 garments: thought, speech, and action. Garments are our expression of what's going on really within inside of ourselves. And therefore garments are a necessity. Therefore, Jewish thought and law believes that we always need to express our inner side feelings, and therefore never to allow just for it to be concealed or hidden. We need to work on expressing it and expressing it in the most fine, refined, and spiritual way with our thought, speech, and action. When God gives Adam and Eve the garments, God is telling them and explaining to them that as a human being in this world, we need to cover our nakedness, meaning the inside needs to be expressed in an appropriate manner, so that it should be able to have an effect on our thought and our speech and ultimately our action. When we dress a certain way, we behave a certain way. When we wear a certain uniform, we know that we are responsible for the wearer and we can be tracked for what we are and who we are. All the garments that the Kohen were that. They were the uniform reminding them of the responsibilities and the awesome holiness that they have and that they need to bring about the Jewish people. Remember, when was the tabernacle made? It was made as an atonement for the sin of the golden calf that we spoke about last week. What caused the sin of the golden calf? The egotism, the belief of the independence, and therefore that they had it all figured out. Over here we know that here we go. We put on the clothing. The Kohen and the Kohen Gadol will wear this clothing because it reminds them of their expression of asking God for an atonement for the sin of the golden calf, realizing it's not all about myself. It's about who I represent. So dress accordingly. Why? Know who you represent. Know who you are. Realize and recognize that you have an opportunity to have that expression, to teach the world and express your inner feelings through clothing. Yes, because when we dress modest, when we wear a yarmulke, when we wear tzitzis, when we are appropriately dressed, we are saying, I am not a person for myself. I have my dependence in God, and God is my leader, and him I should follow. Over here, we very well now understand. When Moses sent the spies, it didn't work out. But the second time Joshua sent spies, it would work out. Because Moses was more about on the innermost. He wasn't looking at how it would come into action. On the contrary, Joshua wanted action because they were about to conquer the land of Israel. We see this very well when it comes to doing any mitzvah. If I do a mitzvah, regardless of what my feelings are about it, I have accomplished a mitzvah. But if I want to do a mitzvah, but I don't do it, it doesn't matter how my feelings were, I never did the mitzvah. Clothing expresses the concept that it's not about what you feel on the inside, it's about what you do on the outside. I can love you very much with my heart, but if I don't show it and I don't say it, it means nothing. Yes. So today, when we learn about in the garment of the Torah, where the Torah spends 43 verses to describe it, or 31 verses in this week's Torah reading, it's telling us, dress accordingly. Put yourself in perspective. Recognize that the way you express yourself has the most impact on the people you meet. God bless you. Have a great day. Looking forward to joining you again tomorrow, lunch break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m. All the best for a wonderful day.